Ah yes, the wonderful drama of Palworld vs Pokemon continues. Today we're going to be diving into a peculiar situation that has us once again questioning the boundaries of copyright, creativity, and community. The TLDR is Nintendo has apparently claimed the Palworld character Sparkit as their intellectual property. Now you may be wondering, how can they do that? And that's really what everyone is wondering, so let's find out. So it all started when a Reddit post emerged that once again sparked controversy in the legal lands of Nintendo. It was in fact only a day later that it was locked by moderators. This post was titled, "Huh? Didn't realize the big N, Nintendo, was the legal rights holder to Sparkit." The OP of this thread, who sells t-shirts on websites like TeePublic and Redbubble, apparently got the ban hammer by Nintendo for a Palworld design of Sparkit. As you can see here, the OP shared a screenshot of an email he received from TeePublic, which states the following. "Dear BitPixel, we're sorry to inform you that an intellectual property claim has been filed by Nintendo of America Incorporated against this design of yours on TeePublic, which it then shows is the design called Sparkit Energy Drink." Now I was actually going to show an image here of the design, but then I realized that could put my video at risk. And maybe I'm wrong since I'm not the one selling the merchandise, but it's not really worth the risk. And that's kind of when I realized how absolutely insane and frankly sad things have become with Nintendo, which is actually going to be the focus of this video. But first, let's discuss what are likely the 3 most plausible scenarios for this strange DMCA. Because while Nintendo has a notorious history for seeking legal action against smaller fish, this one doesn't really make much sense when Nintendo clearly doesn't own the Sparkit character. Number 1, and what I think is probably the most likely, an automated system that scrapes data like keywords and imagery was mistakenly flagged by the merchandise. Now while this seems like the most likely, it still has me curious as to what would flag it. The keywords on this merchandise were likely something along the lines of Sparkit in Palworld. It's possible that the seller put Pokemon somewhere in the description to like have a better SEO, or maybe Nintendo is now using Palworld descriptors to flag their system. But wouldn't it be funny if it was actually image scan that mistook Sparkit for Pikachu? Considering all the drama over Palworld copying Pokemon, that would just be hilarious that Nintendo's own AI scanning software isn't smart enough to tell the difference. Scenario number 2. Someone who fervently hates Palworld, filing the claim under Nintendo's name. While I don't know the exact legal repercussions of something like this, I can't imagine they're good. But I also think it's fairly easy to get away with, and it is unfortunately quite common. YouTube in particular is prone to people falsely reporting or filing claims under a different name in an attempt to take down a video or even an entire channel. So yes, in the world of cancel culture, this does seem, unfortunately, very plausible scenario. And finally, number 3. It's actually Nintendo. The reality is, Nintendo's gonna know a lot more about copyright and DMCA laws than most of us, and there's likely some loophole or legal gray area where they can get away with claiming Sparkit. And while it seems unlikely for Nintendo to claim rights over something they don't own, the complexity of copyright laws and digital content rights under DMCA allow for a pretty broad interpretation, and sometimes, unfortunately, larger companies leverage DMCA notices, knowing smaller parties might lack resources for a legal battle, such as the seller of these t-shirts. Now, I was going to go into how copyright infringement and DMCA laws need more clarity and separation from what are actually just creative freedoms, where people take inspiration and build on top of other ideas. But I think I want to dive a little more into Nintendo and kind of what they've become, and how it's affecting the gaming space and our beloved franchise Pokemon. And then I want to have us do a little thought experiment in a few minutes where we're going to think back to Pokemon and our childhood, and we're really going to try to piece together why there's so much drama right now between Palworld and Pokemon, and why we can't just kind of let things be. So Pokemon for many people holds a lot of significance and of course nostalgia from our childhood. The Pokemon franchise has become the highest grossing media franchise in history, and probably has one of the most loyal fan bases in existence. And yet, Nintendo seems to be the least consumer-friendly company there is. They are almost allergic to any fan-made creations, public promotion, any kind of third-party acknowledgement. And when they were interviewed and asked why they're so strict with their approach, their response is to set an example I'm sorry, but maybe you guys should learn from example from a game like Palworld, which actually delivers a fun experience with a fraction of the funding that you have access to. I don't want to derail here too much, but I want to bring something up that I was actually going to make a whole video on. Please look up Gary Bowser. He is literally the real-life Bowser, the villain to Nintendo. So Gary Bowser was apparently part of a hacker ring that pirated Nintendo games, and he was sentenced to 40 months in prison. He ended up serving 14 on good behavior and was released April 2023. But in the spirit of Nintendo, who loves to set an example, they are still demanding him to pay $14 million. He was basically just the messenger for this illegal website. And now he will spend the rest of his life paying Nintendo a debt he will likely never fulfill. And it's a drop in the ocean of billions that Nintendo has. Look, he broke the law, there's no getting around that. But this feels unnecessary after serving his time. But that's for another discussion, please look it up. And it really just reminded me of how cold and disconnected Nintendo has become. I'm not somebody who condones blindly hating corporations for simply being corporations, but wow, is Nintendo the epitome of corporate greed right now? And it's just sad because Pokemon is suffering for it. Look, I love Pokemon, but if you think Palworld is an example of a bad game, then what Pokemon games have you been playing the last 5 years? Because what I've experienced is utter garbage. Obviously, what makes a good game is mostly subjective, and I don't have any reason to just hate Pokemon. But I am not afraid to criticize the things I love, and in fact, I think it's more beneficial to be critical than to stay quiet. And why would Pokemon ever change if we just don't speak up? And while it's clear that many people over the last few years have been quite verbal in their disappointment with Nintendo, it seems since Palworld's release, it's created a shift in these Pokemon fans, even the ones who were speaking out against Nintendo, and it's put them in defense mode, like Yu-Gi-Oh! I place my pot of greed, aka Nintendo, in defense mode type shit.
Observe my face down card! Pot of greed!
Like that, what is happening? Like, why is Palworld creating so much insecurity in Pokemon fans? We should be able to observe something and be like, wow, look what they delivered. I wish Pokemon would do that. Or you know what? I actually still really like this about Pokemon. You guys have fun with Palworld. Wouldn't that be crazy? I mean, I know, right? It doesn't make any sense. Also, here's some food for thought. Remember when Battlefield 3 made people realize that Call of Duty is actually garbage? And then Battlefield 4 just decimated Call of Duty, like out of existence? It forced them to actually step back and rethink their formula and put effort into improving and making substantial changes in the Call of Duty franchise. And as a result, it became a much better game. The point is, Pokemon needs competition, or they will never have any reason to change or improve. They will keep feeding the same boring gameplay loop with empty worlds and shitty Pokemon designs like this literal fucking lamp. Yeah, remind me how Palworld is the one that lacks passion. Speaking of passion and creativity, in the Pokemonverse Palworld debacle, let us take a moment and breathe, forget about all the drama, and think. Think back to the golden age of your youth. Pokemon is in its prime, and you can't wait to get home from school to play Pokemon. You watch the shows, collect the cards, you play all the games. Now I want you to be honest with yourself. Where did all your love for Pokemon truly come from? I love the Pokemon games, but when I think about it, it's the shows and the movies that really made me love Pokemon. Because it was the shows that you could truly see the characteristics of these Pokemon and feel their companionship between humans and Pokemon as they work and live alongside each other. There isn't a single Pokemon game that gave me that feeling. Now, it's fair to say that technology for games at that time was far different than it is now, and you couldn't achieve that level of emotion. However, even with current Pokemon titles, I don't get that feeling with my Pokemon. They are simply a number in my Pokedex, only existing in their Pokeballs until I summon them for battle. And even with current titles like Scarlet and Violet, where they attempted this open world aspect, the Pokemon still feel lifeless and extremely bland. This is where Palworld truly succeeds, and it's where you can see the passion and creativity that went into this game. You can say what you want about the designs, but there's something you can only understand by actually playing the game. The animations of pals and the way that they interact with the world around them, their facial expressions, the sounds they make, it gives them life and characteristics that are massively lacking from Pokemon. And as a result, I feel closer to my pals than I ever have with my Pokemon. And that's just sad, because I love Pokemon, but I observe things for what they are, and the simple fact is, Palworld has achieved the feeling of companionship that I never really got from Pokemon other than in the shows. And if you ask me, that takes passion and effort to achieve. And I know you're gonna bring up how you can butcher and enslave your pals and oh yeah, some kind of companionship, right? But this is simply a result of giving your players freedom of choice. And while of course these options are seen as morally wrong for some people, that's the beauty of freedom of choice. You don't have to play it that way. Also, let's not pretend like Pokemon isn't literally about capturing cute innocent creatures and forcing them to battle. The only difference is that Pokemon sugarcoats it and Palworld doesn't. And while Palworld allows you to push the limits a bit more, it isn't an outlier to any extent. Ever heard of games like Grand Theft Auto, Skyrim, Call of Duty, Battlefield, Overwatch, Valorant, Fortnite? All games with different age ratings, yet they all involve killing. Are we so desensitized to killing that now forcing fake monsters to work for us is worse? You're free to hate Palworld, but calling it out for these things is just ridiculous. Anyway, just wanted to point that out, I digress. Not to mention, it shows Pocket Pair was actually being considerate of their audience being adults, unlike Pokemon, who refuses to acknowledge that their biggest and most loyal fans are those who grew up with Pokemon and are now adults. Yet they keep producing games for children. But to be honest, I don't even know if kids really like Pokemon games nowadays. It seems like most of their audience is just us, the people who grew up with Pokemon, but I'm not too sure. And I will say this, the numbers don't lie. Pokemon manages to sell a ridiculous amount of games with each new title. And it's at this point that I want to say this. While I wouldn't suggest that it's the consumer's fault for what Pokemon has become, the reality is we can't control Nintendo or Game Freak, and we can't control each other. Let's stop wasting our time and energy in trying to convince everyone around us to have the same opinion and yelling at companies on the internet to change, because even if there's truth to what you're saying, yelling on the internet doesn't really do much. At the end of the day, we can only control ourselves. And in a world where we stop consuming their shitty games, that is when Nintendo will change. But probably not, let's be real. But hey, it's worth a try. Anyways, thank you for watching the video. I love you all. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you really enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And yeah, okay, that's it. Thank you. Goodbye. Have a beautiful time.